So I'm a pediatric oncologist, and I want to tell you a story about telling stories. Good stories have stakes, and I think that the stakes here are really high. The health of those who care for our health. This is the science library at the University of Chicago where I went to college. In 1987, I was a philosophy major, and I had absolutely no business being here other than to gawk at the dinosaur that was in the lobby until I got a job as the overnight security guard. It was like guarding a crypt. The students would leave at midnight, and I'd sit there in the dark and the quiet, totally creeped out by that damn dinosaur. And so to alleviate the boredom, I would roam the racks of journals looking for something interesting to read. And there were countless racks of journals, each day replenished with all of the new daily arrivals. And I learned two things. The physics and chemistry journals, way over my head, but the medical journals were fascinating because they had case studies. And so I developed this habit of roaming the racks and looking for the journals with the goriest case studies. But ultimately, I found that I liked all of the case stories because they were human stories. Most of them had clinical dilemmas, but some had bona fide ethical and moral dilemmas. And it turns out that that's the wrong slide. Telling stories is absolutely essential in medicine, and boy, oh boy, it's the absolute wrong slide. Going to medical school, when I went to medical school from reading these case studies, you learn how to take a history and physical. And that's a standard way of encapsulating medical knowledge that we've used for many, many years. And it turns out that the story is the fundamental unit of communication in medicine. Most medical knowledge is captured in this narrative format. And so I learned to tell these stories, and it became super duper important because when we lose patients due to clerical error, clinical error, or technical error, we tell stories, but we tell them in these secret rounds called morbidity and mortality rounds. Doctors, when they make mistakes, tell stories in private behind closed doors, but we're human, and so we oftentimes make human errors, lack of empathy and lack of time and lack of caring. How do we tell those stories? Some doctors have become authors and get to do this all the time, but what about workaday doctors? How do they tell their stories? Well, about 10 years ago, I tried blogging as a way of telling stories, and it was great because I could share the lessons that I learned with other doctor bloggers. But as you know, the internet doesn't have walls, and if you make a mistake and you tell a story about, say, finding a secret webcam in a patient's room, you might end up on the front page of the newspaper and earning the wrath of the hospital's lawyers. So blogging isn't a good idea, and maybe we shouldn't tell stories, right? What happens in the hospital is supposed to be confidential. But I don't think so, because for millennia, doctors have borne witness to the suffering of patients, but then we take it inside, we compartmentalize it, we move on, and we're professional. And that might be fine when there's room to really be fully human and explore that, but modern medicine isn't like that anymore. It moves very quickly. We don't have the time to be fully human, to hold a hand or even look a patient in the face when they tell us our story. We're a conduit between a patient and an electronic medical record, and we're losing something fundamental in the nature of our profession. And as a result, we're seeing an epidemic of physician burnout. Doctors don't want to take care of computers. We want to take care of humans. We want to get close to our patients, not compartmentalize them and digitize them. And the phrase, physician heal thyself, is oftentimes attributed to the disciple Luke, who himself was a physician, quoting Jesus. But actually it came from Aeschylus, and I truly believe that through storytelling, doctors can cure their own despair here. In an analysis of hundreds of physician-authored stories, 5 recurring themes came forward. Practicing medicine is a privilege, patients are vulnerable, doctors are fallible, humanity matters, and the system is flawed. About 3 years ago, I started telling stories at the Moth and at Fresh Ground Stories, and it was remarkably healing for me to share the painful lessons that I learned, and for people to come up to me and tell me how gratifying it was to see the human side of medicine. I truly believe that doctors telling stories is a way to fix physician burnout. Telling stories requires reflection and introspection. It generates empathy. And by sharing our stories, we generate trust in the patients who we've taken an oath to serve. I truly believe that doctors and nurses should share their stories, write and reflect, get up on stage, show how patients touch your life. The word doctor comes from the Latin docere, to teach. When patients share their stories with us, they become our teachers, they become our doctors. Let's share our stories with them. Thank you.